and welcome to Lost Media Chronicles, a show of which goes over various movies, music, art, you name it. This particular episode's topic is going to be a topic that I basically talk about the most, which is music. And I know some of my audience members are getting a little sick of it, but in this case, cut me some slack. This is more about a ballet and its lost choreography. Ballet is a very unique art form, utilizing dance to create expression and storylines without the use of words. Many of these are open to interpretation, while others have a very straightforward plot. Most of the time a musical score is written, often by famous composers, and in a very few cases there may be no music at all. Whether or not musicless ballet really counts as ballet, though, is up for debate, but that's not what this episode is about. No, this episode is about a very famous and influential ballet called the Rite Spring, composed by Igor Stravinsky with choreography done by Yaroslav Nijinsky. Our story starts in 1908, involving a renowned Russian composer named Igor Stravinsky. Stravinsky was a Russian composer, and as such penned works that showed tendencies towards Russian folk music and traditions. After studying law for a few years in Russia, he started exploring his true passion, music. As he detached himself from his law studies, his musical talent grew. He traveled all over Europe, living mostly in Switzerland during the winters, returning to Russia for the summers. A few moderately successful orchestral pieces written by him caught the attention of a man named Sergei Diaghilev. Diaghilev was a famous ballet impresario, meaning the person who organizes ballets and makes them possible. Think of impresarios being the producers of the ballet world, if you will. Diaghilev showed interest in working with Stravinsky to bring Russian ballet to a Western European audience. He decided to commission Stravinsky to write scores for ballets to be performed in Paris. Stravinsky's first two ballets, The Firebird and Petrushka, gained considerable critical acclaim. Now, in order to understand how the Rite Spring's choreography went missing, it really helps to understand what was going on at the time, not just in the world of music, but in the world of art in general. The early 1900s marked the end of the Romantic era of art. In paintings, literature, and music, Romanticism was all about making huge, bold statements using complex means and deep emotions. In this case, the word romantic isn't exactly used the way it's frequently used today. Love was one of the emotions explored, but Romanticism was more about exploring all forms of emotion, from joy to sadness to even horror. Of course, this is a very simplified explanation of the movement, but you get the point. In most art forms, Romanticism had already died out, with the movement being seen as nothing but a pretentious waste of time for most people. The art scene was just simply getting progressively bored with it. The world of paintings and drawings became more about distorting images by making them progressively more abstract. Vincent van Gogh wowed people with his flowing colors and expressions, while Pablo Picasso had a more geometric approach and made things look even more abstract than any artist before him. Literature became about abstract plots that took the reader even longer to find out exactly what the author was saying. Finnegan's Wake, anyone? The key to this whole then-new contemporary movement was breaking the basic fundamental rules placed on an art form and virtually rewriting it to make it seem new again. Now, in all eras of art, music has this nasty tendency to being a little late to the party. It takes music anywhere from 5 to 10 years after the beginning of a movement to really start becoming part of it. In the early 1900s, the swelling works of Wagner, Beethoven, and Berlioz were all being copied, and audiences found themselves getting bored with the overall sound. That's part of the reason why Stravinsky was so well loved to begin with. He was exploring the Russian style of music and mixing it in with traditional Western classical music. Romanticism was getting so old, especially with Mahler having passed away 2 years prior, that people wanted to hear foreign forms of music to replace the now tired cliches. Stravinsky traveled various European villages and gained an interest in folk music from a variety of countries. Now, we've all heard the age-old argument of classical music versus popular music, but a lot of people would assume that it's a modern argument, but this isn't the case. Back in 1911 to about 1913, the popular form of music was called folk music. At one point, in some cultures, calling music folk music was considered derogatory. Classical was associated with the upper class / bohemians of the time, while folk music was associated with lower class / villagers of the time. With the way popular music has taken a turn to be the more consumed form of music in modern day, this seems like a foreign idea to us now. Stravinsky thought there was something beautiful about the seemingly darker ugliness that folk music had to offer. He wanted to incorporate this sound into a new work that nobody had heard before. Over the course of 1911 to 1912, Stravinsky started crafting a new piece that he would later title The Rite of Spring. Inspired by poems depicting ritualistic sacrifices done by early man, Stravinsky constructed a storyline around the idea of young women dancing and offering a virgin sacrifice, and a virgin dancing herself to death to please the gods. The music, naturally, would sound just as tribal. He incorporated a bassoon solo, which was inspired by various Lithuanian folk songs of the day. Stravinsky presented Diaghilev with a two-hand piano version, which is now presumed lost. Then, this was expanded to a four-hand piano version to give a sense of a full scale of the ballet's sound. When production officially began, Stravinsky worked with famous ballet dancer and choreographer Yaroslav Nijinsky. The two had worked together on The Firebird and Petrushka. At first, Stravinsky hated the 21-year-old dancer for acting immature for his age. The two often argued over the dance sequences and the music alike. At one point, Stravinsky demanded Nijinsky rewrite the entire choreography from scratch. Things got even more stressful when musicians and dancers started walking out on the ballet, leading to the rush hiring of replacements. It was feared that it wouldn't make its deadline for its premiere in Paris, but luckily things eventually got on track and rehearsals finished on time despite these difficulties. Stravinsky and Nijinsky even found a middle ground and started getting along. Now for this next part, I want you to kind of close your eyes and imagine that you're there seeing the premiere of The Rite of Spring in 1913. You're in a small Paris theater and it's chock full of audience members that are just looking forward to Stravinsky's next big work. You see the orchestra get into the pit and you hear them warm up, although they're now out of sight. The lights go down and the stage illuminates. You hear the dark, ominous hum of the orchestra playing the first few notes, and the dancers start making their way onto the stage. It's a very peculiar sound, as you're used to most ballets and symphonies opening with a bright sound, but you go along with it. Beethoven opened his Ninth Symphony with something dark and depressing sounding, and it turned out to be a masterpiece. What could go wrong, you think? Then you hear the billowing bassoon solo, and something shocking happens. The audience grows angry as soon as one particular member shouts out a vulgarity. The dancers continue their performance and the audience loses their sanity all the more. You see a few seconds of the seemingly sexual choreography before the riot becomes so massive you can't even see the stage. Objects are being thrown at the performers. Various audience members seem desperate to stop the ordeal. Others are just trying their best to enjoy it, but because of the riot, they just can't. This is precisely what happened at the premiere of Rite of Spring. The music proved to be much too controversial, but what really upset the audience was the choreography itself. Considered far too sexual for the time, it was condemned by critics and audience members alike. The dancers and musicians struggled to finish the performance, but did so under the guidance of Stravinsky and Nijinsky. After the performance, both Stravinsky and Nijinsky were considered laughingstocks, with neither one of them ever tackling such an ambitious work again for many years. The ballet received a pitiful 8 performances in 1913 before eventually being shut down due to poor reception and financial failure. To a lot of people, this may seem really shocking and surprising because Rite of Spring is considered to be one of the most important and influential works of art ever made. It opened the gateway to new experimentation and led to both music and ballet becoming more abstract as the century went on. Composers such as Schoenberg, John Cage, and Stockhausen all owe a great deal of gratitude to the work. The choreography has inspired future ballets to push limits even further, allowing for more crude and sexual themes to be explored. One production company even did a downright sexualized version of The Rite of Spring in 2002, where the lead performer ended up dancing herself to death in the nude after the other performers rip her clothes off. While the music still survives in full, the same cannot be said about the choreography. A lot of people that hear the music associate it with Fantasia since it was featured in that movie, which make people think more about dinosaurs and the creation of Earth than they do about Native Americans and tribalistic dancing. This is because the choreography has become lost to time. Ballet is passed down mostly orally, with companies needing to take lessons from experts in the works in question. Despite the moderate success of LABA notation, which is difficult to follow, this remains the only way most choreography is re-performed. Of course, this leads to some production companies adding their own little twists and spins to some performances, but for the most part they stay true to their original stature. Due to its harsh reception and it only getting 8 performances back in 1913, it's easy to see how the choreography simply just got forgotten over time. Now fast forward to the 1980s, you get people wanting to recreate Nijinsky's original choreography. With so many different interpretations of Rite of Spring floating around, many people just wanted to see the way it was originally intended to be performed, rather than seeing all the different ways people were doing it. Starting in the early 80s, Joffrey Ballet put years worth of painstaking research to reconstruct the ballet. Using various historical documents, descriptions from surviving performers and audience members, as well as Nijinsky's nearly indecipherable notes, it was building up hype as the years went on. Finally, in 1987, for the first time in nearly 75 years, the Rite of Spring was performed start to finish as close to its premiere choreography as possible. So with this reconstruction available and the nature of ballet being passed down orally, is the choreography still technically lost? Well, it really depends on how you look at it. On one hand, purists will tell you that because of Nijinsky's hard-to-read notes and the fragile nature of the way the choreography is taught, without decisive evidence, it should still be considered lost. Others feel as if the choreography is as close as it would be if it were performed regularly and not a controversy to begin with, and therefore it should be considered quote-unquote found. A third camp of people will take the middle ground and say that it's astonishingly close, but nowhere near as close to the performances of classics such as Black Swan or The Nutcracker. Either ways, the debate does spark passionate arguments from both sides of the spectrum, and how can you blame them? Deep art like this makes us make a big deal out of something that seems like nothing to people who don't understand. We want to experience it exactly the way the artist wanted us to see it, regardless of controversy. I see a lot of people ask the question, so what? It's just lost choreography, it's not that big of a deal. But we're talking about one of the most important and influential pieces of ballet ever, which means that choreography, the most essential part of a ballet, is pretty darn important to have in its entirety. To this day, the Rite of Spring continues to inspire new interpretations and recreations of the original interpretation. And in 2013, there was what is considered to be the closest adaptation of the original choreography to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the ballet. But until we actually are able to read Nijinsky's notes, or if we can somehow time travel back to 1913 and watch the original performances, this is still probably considered a lost piece of media. Join us next time when we go over a special request from one of the admins of the Lost Media Wiki. See you later. Hey guys, we've never done this end slate business before, so let's just go ahead and whack it right out of the way. Be sure to like, subscribe, and watch more of our videos if you liked what you saw today. Be sure to check out some of the other videos on our channel, such as other episodes of the Lost Media Chronicles, and of course our music review show 2 Beats Plus. It's currently on hiatus, but we will be revamping it again around May, hopefully. Thank you guys for watching, and we hope to see you again next time.